Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and my guest today is Michael Sieff, and we're going to be talking about the phases of life, or as a project that he's got on the go, the circle of life. Now, Mother Teresa says the most terrible poverty is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved. And this is one of the things we're going to be discussing, this loneliness, why we need to sometimes think about community living. And let me just tell you a bit about Mike. Mike is an experienced CEO and a very strong leader, and he's skilled in operations management, strategic planning, turnaround organizational change and social entrepreneurship, and he's demonstrated history of working in aged care, health, financial services, non-profit, general business, and he is also an accredited mediator and executive and management coach. All of those and many more actually make him the perfect person that I wanted to discuss today about loneliness and the feeling of what next. And, Mike, welcome first of all.
Thanks so much, Sue. Good to be here.
I especially phoned you because I'd had quite a few people contacting me about over Pesach, and then it was Easter, Ramadan, and funny enough, I've had people contacting me from all different spheres of life and different areas that they've been busy in, and saying how lonely they are over those special holiday times. And then, of course, we've had all the public holidays as well. What is your idea of that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is so on point. I mean, loneliness is there, and particularly for certain age groups. And I think it's cyclical. There are certain times in the year, as you've just mentioned, and April, May being one of them, where there's so many people on holiday, away, the normal routine is different. And then people really suffer, and that quote from Mother Teresa is apt. It really is a trauma and an illness. Mm-hmm. So I think it is very prevalent generally, and then at certain points in the year, even more so. It was an interesting thing. I used to work at Discovery quite a while ago, so I've got some good contacts and people there still. And a few years ago, before COVID, so we must also throw COVID into this mix as well. But before COVID, I was chatting to one of the R&D guys, and he was telling me that they had just commissioned a research to say, what are the different factors of longevity? What do people need, and particularly in an older person, what do they need for longevity? And if you think about it, and the listeners think about it, you think of maybe compliance to medicine, physical health, fitness, what you eat, etc. But the one and the top one that actually came out from the study was social interaction. That there's a correlation between people's social interaction and their longevity, or the converse, unfortunately, their loneliness and what that does to somebody's psyche, their well-being, mental illness, as well as actually physical illness.
Well, I can really understand that, and we're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back on 101.9 High FM on the Finding Human program. If you would like to contact us, you can on SMS 34519 or Telegram on 061 895 1019. My guest today is Michael Sieff, and we're talking about community, the connections, what actually makes us feel that we are connected. And Mike comes with a lot of experience, having been the group chief executive officer at the Jewish Chevra Kadisha group for almost 9 years.
8 years. Yeah.
8 years, okay. Well, actually, it was 8.5, Michael. And then also the national director of ORT, South Africa, and you were the head of the training at at Discovery. So you've come with a lot of your own skills. Tell me a bit about what you have found over the years.
Thanks, Sue. So I did start off in the corporate world, which was fantastic, had its pressures. And then after Discovery for 7 years, went into the NGO world and worked professionally for NGOs, particularly Ought South Africa. That was my starting point, which was a Jewish organization, but very broad-based, looking at education and upliftment and development, particularly in the previously disadvantaged communities, and doing a little bit, Ought we started as well for the Jewish community. After that, went into the Chev and was there for just over 8 years, as you say. And it's interesting from the Chev point of view, between Sanram Gardens, Golden Acres, and our parents' home, as well as people in the community of a certain age, the 80% of the budget, certainly when I was there, was being spent in the aged care environment. And of course, we had constraints, and it's an NGO, et cetera, but even Selwyn Siegel, to think of it, Selwyn Siegel, which is for the mentally challenged or intellectually challenged people, 70% of them are over 70. So there's also, it's not an aged care facility per se, but that is a target audience. So I learned a fortune, generally, but then specifically in the aged care environment, and managing, a large contingent of staff, over 1,000 staff, had 1,000 residents. So it was a huge operation with constraints, and with such positivity as well. When I left the Chev, I was, considering what to do, and I just thought that I needed to get into the aged care environment for a few reasons. I mean, firstly, there's a strong business case. The baby boomers are coming of age. There's a serious lack of good supply of good facilities for this target audience worldwide, and especially in South Africa. I do have a specific passion for older people and a rapport, and I'd also had the experience and the kind of the scars and the experience and the ups and downs of managing and being involved in such places. So with that, started my journey to get to Circle. About 6 months later, after I'd left the Chev, the Chief Operations Officer, Corrine Breert Ramutla, she had left the Chev, and we were having coffee. I remember in Linksville, we just caught up and we were seeing what we were doing, etc. And we said, let's give this a go. The community at large, that target audience needs a change, needs something to look forward to rather than the sentence that is typically given to people.
So your actual idea was to branch out away, not totally away, but not just focusing on Jewish aged.
Correct. So it's not exclusively Jewish, and it's actually very broad based, and I suppose it is quite dependent on which areas the facilities are in, because we've seen from research and anecdotally as well that people typically like to retire within 5 kilometer radius of where they live. It's their Medina in Yiddish. It's their home. It's their social network. They know where the pharmacy, the shops, etc. So that typically does happen. So what we decided to do is branch out to wherever the need is, and across South Africa there's huge need. So we're starting off in Sandown, and we've got Melrose and Houghton in the pipeline.
And in Cape Town, I think.
In Cape Town, correct. In Sea Point, one further away. So that's where we're going towards. I suppose there's a huge need and demand for these type of facilities and services. What we're trying to do as a differentiator, and which we are doing, and we'd love for the whole of South African industry to copy this as well, because I think what's different, and I'll explain exactly one of the differentiators that we talk about, but to say that one of our key differences is that everything we do comes from a care basis. You've heard about mine, and Corinne's got even more care experience. So this isn't a property play or etc. It's actually about the person and the individual that we know very well, and we know some of the struggles that they go through, and trying to create our offering around that person. So one example, which, as I say, we'd love for the industry to latch onto, is we call it apartment for life or home for life, which basically means, and maybe I'll illustrate this by saying that a typical aged home or senior living centre, whatever you want to call it, when you walk into one of those in South Africa at the moment, if you're independent, you go into the independent living. if one gets more frail, you have to move physically to the assisted living, and there again to the frail care. And through my experience at the Sieff, I mean, I had to do this many times to the actual person themselves, or sitting opposite their kids and saying, sorry, mom actually has to move to the next level. So what we're doing with Apartment for Life is to say that once somebody moves into a circle facility, once you're a circle living member, that is built with everything in mind. You don't walk in and see, oh, there's rails everywhere and et cetera, et cetera. But if you actually look closely, the bathroom is wheelchair friendly. The things are the right height. It's built with that in mind, so that the person has the dignity that once they move in, should they become more frail, assisted frail in those terminology, they don't have to have the trauma of moving again. Typically what we make people do after, I don't know, being in their homes for 30 years and having to pack up and do whatever they have to do, which is traumatic, they move into a centre, and then a few years later they have to move again to assisted, then they have to move again to frail care. So that is a key component that that differentiates Circle. And part of that is the dignity and that care lens that we look at throughout everything we do. And I think that links directly to the loneliness factor as well, because once you have your apartment and you're entertaining and you've got your tribe, you've got your community that one actually establishes friendships with, or old friends who come with you into the centre. You don't get shipped out to you have to go to the to the next block, etc. So it just keeps that connection with your friends going.
And that actually that rings quite true for me, because my mom was in a Christian retirement village. She had a beautiful little flat and a lot of friends, and eventually, as far as she was concerned, she was the manager of the whole place. And I mean, Mark knew my mother, 5 foot tall and quite a dynamic personality. Anyway, so
I would never start with Vera.
No. So she thought she ran the whole place, and quite honestly, one day I got a phone call from her carer. Well, I'll get back to that.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. And my guest today is Michael Sieff. And we're talking about the different phases of life and how to actually go into them feeling more secure and making a life for yourself. You can contact us if you'd like to on SMS 34519, or you can telegram us on 061 895 1019. Now, before we went to break, I was telling you about my mom, who was in a Christian retirement village, thought she ran the place, had a wonderful time. One day, and she had friends over every evening for a drink. One day, her carer, she didn't need a carer, but she did. She had a companion. And Rosie phoned me one day and said, Miss Sue, can you please get me a few extra bottles? So I said, what for? She said, well, I think Granny and her friends are drinking a little bit too much of that brown sherry. Yeah. So I want to dilute it with water, and they're not going to know. Well, certainly they didn't know. They still enjoyed their sherry every evening. But then as she began to get a bit frailer, we had to move her into a frail care section, right, which she was also happy about, because she still felt she was now running the frail care section. Although it was very hard for her to move out of her cottage. She loved her garden and everything. And then from there, unfortunately, after my brother passed away, she went straight into dementia the same day, and we had to put her into the Alzheimer's unit. Right. And so all those moves, what you say are absolutely true, Mark. They are quite disturbing for them all.
It's traumatic, and unfortunately the deterioration actually happens quicker than we think. When it does switch, it actually unfortunately does go quickly. I was thinking while taking the advert break, in terms of the loneliness and that demographic and that age group, why is it so impactful? And why does it have such an impact on the person, and what are the causes? And if you think of 70 plus, all of a sudden, after having fruitful, relevant, quality life, because somebody tells them either they're retired at work, or because they have to move into a certain place, or physically they're at a certain stage, all of a sudden we as the society tell them, thanks thank you very much for good innings. Now go and retire. And then all of a sudden they become, CEO or a head of a family, whatever the person has got so much to give and has given, and made meals themselves. Now we tell them, sorry, you have to actually have supper at 5 o'clock, and it has to be X. So we take away all of these choices and the relevance and the quality of life from these people, and I think that's where we're doing a disservice. Maybe decades ago, people used to want to retire and et cetera, but we created this industry. But I think the baby boomers, they don't want to retire. It's just another phase, and worldwide we can see this, and different stars are really advocating for senior living and for living part of senior living.
So do you think it's because people crave the connection of one another?
I think we're social beings. That is, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, there's maybe there's a parameter, you're on a line in terms of how interactive you are. But at the end of the day, we are social beings, and we are ingrained in us is that relationships. And of course, at that age, unfortunately, some of people's partner or spouse, friends are passing away, and that circle of your interactions are getting smaller and smaller, and then some of the choices are taken away from one, and all of these things, which don't mean to be undignified, but they're creating a different narrative for the person. I am frail. I am sick. I just want to stay in bed. It's a cycle that we are actually, unfortunately, as an industry, facilitating, and that's what we actually have to bash against, and actually either the person themselves, and you can see it when you see attitude. I think of your mom as well, that attitude of getting out there and doing things. My job is not done here, and when the facility or the environment is such as well, because there's social programming and real social programming. I don't mean the secretary just puts a bingo evening together and we say, great, tick, we've done the social programming. Really innovative things, and things that are customized to the individual. This target audience also wants choice. They're coming through, and you can't give the offering that we gave to people 30 years ago or 20 years ago. We need to actually be sophisticated and really aligned to all the technology and all the learning that we've been fortunate to have.
As you say that, it reminds me of two of my friends, actually one in Knysna and one in Johannesburg, who joined the University of the Third Age.
Yes.
And I was absolutely staggered by the courses that were offered, and they were so stimulated by it.
True.
And I really thought, when I retire, I'm going to...
Sue. I don't think they're going to let you.
But you know what? It's just amazing what you can do today, and especially with computers and Google and Safari. You've got your own encyclopedia. My friend Les Erwig in Australia, his father couldn't believe that once he was shown how to work the computer, that he actually had a library at his fingertips.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the positives that came out of COVID. Some of these initiatives, these universities, online universities. I was speaking to a lady 2 weeks ago. She came to come and have a look at one of the apartments, and she was raving about this university online. And she said, well, she's doing courses, and when she moves in, she'd be happy to facilitate and help people register and whatever else. And it's so easy to do, but it does create this window for people to get out of their potential downslide that they're going through and actually do something relevant to them and something exciting. I think part of the impact that people have when they when the world is shrinking is it's almost a cold stare at one's reality, and you have to have a lot of EQ and a lot of internal strength to be able to look at that. Like sometimes there's this like existential introspection, like what have I done, what's my life worth, etc. And I think not as a distraction, but as something to actually stimulate and really actually grab that and use that positively and do good. I'll tell you about a lady that I recently saw as well in a moment, that how doing good and she's got a full life.
Why do you need a moment? Why
Okay,
can't
can I
you
do it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So great. It was last week Thursday, I was meeting with her. She's just bought at Circle Sandown. And she's got a busy life, she's between her grandkids and this and her partner. She was, she had to make the time, etc. Then we carried on the conversation on WhatsApp, and I welcomed her and said, we're looking so forward to having you and etc. in our place. And I was just, I didn't think out of it at the time, but subsequent to us getting together this morning, I was thinking about it. She replied to me on the WhatsApp, so looking forward to it. And I mean, she's I think quite a hectic bridge player. She said, I look forward to helping you on the cards and the bridge, etc. And then she also said, and I know I've got a busy schedule, but I'll also make time to visit some people if they are infirm and if they can't get around. So I thought, wow, she's a lovely lady. I thought that's a great offering.
That's a person we really need.
So I thought all of that, and I think it's true. She's wonderful, and she's generous with her time, and she's very active and well, and she wants to share that. But then I actually, since we chatted a few days ago, I thought actually re-looked at what her response, and I think it is all of that, but it also is her sense of purpose. It's also doing something and will actually feed her and feed her soul. So I think by doing good, people actually get energy. And
that's so true. And Mark, I can bring my mom Vera in on this again, because she noticed that a lot of people were dying on their own. The staff were fantastic with them in the hospital section. That was when she was still thought she was chairwoman and was in her cottage. And she started a group of older women to go and sit with people who were dying. Right. And whose family had immigrated or left or were living somewhere else in South Africa, to actually say that they were never alone. And it took, my mom had a group, and, they had times.
Right.
And even like feeding times and things like that, to go and sit with the person, help wherever they could. You cannot believe what it did to the people who were helping, never mind the ones who were being helped.
Exactly.
But the carers were growing in their own sense of purpose and meaning.
Exactly. And I think that is part of it. And what does society do typically at people at that age is say, you don't have a purpose anymore, or what was so important to you on your family, on the business, is now over and done, and go and relax. Relaxing is wonderful, but
only
as a
for
holiday,
certain people.
Only for certain people and for a certain amount of time.
Absolutely.
So I think, and we see it, and through my kind of experience when dealing with volunteers, or myself being a volunteer, when people say, and you thank the people for volunteering or for doing whatever they're doing, charity work, and they say, and then the response has been, I got more out of this than you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to give. And
true.
And we see that, and back to this group and the social interaction that they have, and this reason for waking up in the morning. If I don't get up and I don't go, in your example, go visit Mary, nobody else will do. That is a huge responsibility, and I'm going to take it seriously, and that will push me to forget about my pains and my arthritis and whatever else, and to go and do good. And I think that is critical in the social programming and the fabric of how a place like that is run, whether it's actually in a facility or even on a home-based basis, when people in the community who may be living at home, and if they don't have a purpose, it's a slippery slope, and it's depressing.
Absolutely. And as you're talking, it reminds me of the sakura, how do you pronounce them? Sakura trees. The redwood trees. Okay. They've got very shallow roots, but the roots are all intertwined. So sometimes it looks as though 3 trees are actually one tree because they're so intertwined. Right. And what happens is they get nutrients from like the fog. So they grow to great, great heights. Yeah. And you think, how on earth can they not be blown over when there's a storm or whatever? But because of this interaction that they have and interconnectedness, yes, it keeps them standing tall. But one of the things that they found, that if one tree was hurt, the others hurt.
Wow.
If one tree was felled, the others felt it as well. So I think we can learn so much from nature and how to support one another. And when one tree was feeling a little bit ill, the other trees would give it nutrients in their roots. Isn't that amazing?
It is. That's
Craig's
amazing.
just put something on here for me. It's from Mary Ann. Hello, Sue. My mother also had to move twice in one facility and then had to leave that after 5 years and move to a far less pleasant facility. The grace, however, was that my mother never moved to the frail care section of her last dementia facility. It's hard when you rather your mother passed than moved to human terminus. My term for it, wow, human terminus. Mary Ann from Northcliffe. That's so true, Mary Ann. Thank you so much for sending that.
Well, and if I can comment on that,
Yes.
it's often, that is traumatic, as we've said, and multiple times, and it's almost in your face, and each move is saying to the person, you're closer to death. It's not saying that there's something to live for, which is obviously traumatic for the person and the daughter and the family. Often I found with these, and having run similar facilities, that a lot of it is done at the convenience of the operator. So it's much easier to serve dinner at a certain time because we know when the shifts are coming in and out. It's much easier to get all the rooms cleaned at certain times. It's never about not never. It's hardly ever about the actual individual and about the customer service, about the client who's there, the person. The person is there, not the number, not the number 302 is complaining again. It's not about that. It's about the person and how we can actually be flexible. And maybe it's not as efficient for us as operators, but that is the standard that we should offer the service at. That what is good for the person. And then actually it will all work out, because that person, when they are happier or they're not lonely, they will stop buzzing every 2 minutes just for nonsense and inverted commas things. What is the actual reason why they need that interaction?
The deeper meaning.
Exactly. So I think if we operate rather at that deeper level, I think it will be more dignified for the individual. They'll have a much better experience, and I'm talking about the individual and their families. And then as operators, yes, it will be inconvenient, but the product will be so much better. And I'm talking not obviously only Circle, South Africa, I'm talking about the industry-wide. And I think there will be a pushback. There will be this age group, and Sue, you're not there yet, but you're this age group is demanding, and so they should be. And we need change, and we need to actually do this better.
Well, sometimes I kind of feel I'm beyond that age group. I'd like to have some of those needs taken care of. But, what Marianne says also, I think is so important, is the family interaction. I know that when I had to move my mom, especially straight after my brother passed away, into the dementia, I felt such pain. She, in many ways, wasn't aware of it, although she did keep going down passages, I think, looking for her old place, But the family suffers so much with these decisions.
Yeah. I think there's two things. There's a whole change management process for the individual, let's say, actually moving into a home or moving into the stage of life. That in itself is a whole process and a psychologically draining process. I have to downsize, but I don't want to downgrade, or I've lived. What does it mean, etc. And that in itself, and I've seen it, and especially now, it's not a quick decision. And even when it's quick, there's a lot of backwards and forwards, and just reassurance. And what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing, etc., etc. So I think that's one element of it for the individual, that change management process that they go through. As the family, whether it's the child or or grandchildren, any family member, close family member, has got all those range of emotions. Am I doing the right thing for my mom? Is there? Am I being a good? Am I being a good daughter, respectful? And there's a fear element, there's a guilt element. All of those things get enmeshed. And there's also, I suppose, a relief element when the person who you love and care for is actually in a good place. And yes, you as the daughter are managing it and managing it upwards and being on top of the provider, and I think that is good, because you're demanding a certain level of service for your cared one.
But Mark, saying that, if you actually look at the loneliness now of people who have been left alone because families have immigrated, children have immigrated, and there's this mass migration almost around the world of children whereas before they might have stayed. If they graduated in Johannesburg or went to school, they would stay here with the people they knew and everything. But nowadays that's changing. It's becoming far more likely that people are going to move, that even if it's just to Cape Town and you're in Johannesburg, and so that you're not going to see them over these holiday periods and
Correct.
as you get ill or anything.
Correct. And even with the technology, which is fantastic, and you can interact with one's child overseas so easily, it's not the same, firstly. Secondly, everybody's got busy lives, and those scheduled phone calls aren't always scheduled and don't always happen. So we're definitely seeing that most of the people who've bought into our facility have got people overseas, and sometimes there's one kid here, but it's a family decision, and it's all of that. But it's through all over the world, and Cape Town, national, if it's Joburg to Cape Town as well. So there are these split families from a children perspective, and which presents huge challenges. And that's why I think it highlights the importance of social interaction with friends, with people in the same situation. And even if it is just to show photographs and to brag about the grandchildren, whatever else, but at least there's an interaction, or maybe it's to play bridge or tennis, But what I've seen is that typically this person who's moving in is fiercely independent and doesn't want to be a burden to the children, and they obviously miss them, and they would prefer if the situation was different and they were in proximity, but
they don't want to bother them.
Exactly. So, but
what?
But they want to live a fulfilled life.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get back to that. Thank you, Craig.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and I'm back with Michael Sieff. And Mike, I was just thinking about the loneliness of people who often are left alone here. And not with family, and if they are in a retirement village, and I've certainly experienced this with many people that I've visited, they can be sitting together at least. I visited someone the other day at Sandringham Gardens with a friend of mine, and we went to go and see a man there, and the next minute another 3 men joined us.
Right.
I think they just wanted the company.
They're in short supply, men.
I thought perhaps they were short supply of women. But so the two of us, my friend and I, actually spent quite a few, about 2 hours or so, with these other men who had joined us, and it was actually a nice morning. But they needed that company, they really did.
Yeah.
And if you look at retirement, you and I were talking about retirement and how retirement has actually, the lifespan has doubled and sometimes trebled what we knew before, and a third of life is spent in retirement really now.
Yeah. So and that is why I suppose internationally as well, there's challenges to what the retirement age should be, the official retirement age, and certainly the interaction that I've had with people 65, 70 up, they're not ready for retirement. I saw a 78-year-old guy the other day, a dentist, and he loved the place, whatever he said, but in a few years' time I'll think about it, which is fantastic. So I think there's a few things there, is that, so then why don't people take the plunge? If they want the social interaction, and if they don't want to retire, either because they've got it at home, and that's fantastic. But I do think that people have got reservations because they've got almost either what they had to do with their parents and the home, and I'm using that word especially, like that I can't put, I had to put my mother in the home, but I know what it's like, and I'm not prepared to go there, etc. So I think they've got an old school view of what that reality was, and actually what they should demand and expect is a beautiful hotel. It's just that instead of you staying for a weekend, you're getting the service and the hospitality and the insurance of care should one day you need it, all in one. And I think that's why some people are actually being proactive and making that move, because they consider all of those factors. And of course, the social interaction. And actually, it's something relevant and to busy their time with now that if they do have some spare time.
Well, I was listening to a TED talk on retirement, which it very much covered almost what you said. But they also said that the beginning stages of retirement are almost like a holiday, wonderful. Wake up when we want to and go to sleep when we want to and what have you. But there are 4 phases, they said. The first phase is like a vacation stage, no set routine. If you've got money, you can travel, you can go on holiday. But within a year, you get bored.
Yes.
Then they talk about the second stage, which is loss. And it's the loss of routine, of identity, of work relationships, of purpose.
Right.
And this stage is very traumatic. And this is when the 3 Ds appear, this person on the TED Talk was saying, which is depression, decline, and divorce, which was quite interesting because we saw that in the pandemic.
Yes.
And also what happens then, as you said, they begin to decline physically and mentally because they're not stimulated, and they feel fear, uncertain, and of course the anxiety comes in. Then the third stage is trial and error. How can I make my life more meaningful? And they begin to experiment with things, and especially like in a facility, like you're talking about, where people can help you look at what you can, where you can still fulfill yourself, and wanting to get up in the morning, needing to do that. And the fourth stage was reinvention and rewire and recover and rediscover. And
Beautiful.
Most of that was service to others.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Of how to reinvent.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's wonderful. I think that gives a great process that people go through. Like any change management or change that people go through. And I think the underlying thing is that purpose, and that reason for being and that reason to give. And I think that you have some people who are aware of this and self-aware and want to be proactive. Not to say that they won't go through these phases, but they're not going into this kicking and screaming. It's a reality, and now I'm going to downsize. I don't need this and whatever else. But still traumatic going through these stages. And other people are just in denial, and unfortunately only at a time of urgency or emergency would have to deal with it and themselves and their families.
That's so true. We've got another message coming through from Carol Kruger. Morning, Sue. Always enjoy your program. Please can this gentleman, that's Mike Sieff, tell us what are the costs of this lovely place he is talking about, from Carol. Sure. Can we rather give your number out? Would you like to give your number out now, perhaps, Mike?
Thanks, Carol, and other listeners. I don't
Carol.
want to make it an advert, but happy to really take your emails or calls. It's Circle Living, which is one word, so circleliving.co.za. So if you want to send an email, it's sales@circleliving.co.za.
And I went into the site, and it's actually got a lot there. Are you telling me to start? No, sorry. Winston Churchill said, fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. What do you think of that?
I think...
Do you want to argue with Winston? Or
well, he's not here, so it wouldn't be fair. And he is who he was. I think that is true. Fear is a reaction. It's a flight, fright kind of a reaction that is wired into us, and how we deal with that. And what was the second part?
I think the second part is courage is a decision.
Yeah. So whatever you're faced with, and you have the reaction of fear, then you have to try and master that fear.
And that's the choice that comes in.
Yeah, and that takes that courage, where there's a stimulus, and before the response, there's a thoughtfulness.
Absolutely.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Michael Sieff. And before we're going to be told to end just now, but I actually wanted to say that Michael is actually my nephew, married to my niece Amanda. And so it's wonderful having you here,
Thanks,
Mike.
Sue.
And Mike, I was thinking of the South African context. Last week we had something stolen from our house, and I've been feeling a bit insecure. And, we're in a large garden, And so from a South African perspective, or not even South African, but worldwide with the safety but here, especially with load shedding and what have you, how's that impacting you?
I think that's another reason why some people are actually looking to move into similar facilities. It's the hassle and the real hassle of running the generator, and when that's not okay, then you need the inverter. Now there's solar. It's just endless the requirement from a power perspective. There's also the security element, which people and rightly so are afraid of. So people are moving into these type of facilities, and they're unique to South Africa in some extent because it provides that security on all levels and the care on all levels. So not just clinical care, but actual, as we've been talking about, the social care, etc. But on the other, that may be negative forces pushing people to that. But the output is actually amazing and positive. Then you've got a community. Then you've got actually people who don't have to hassle and worry about the day-to-day, putting chemicals in the pool or servicing the elevator or whatever is
filling the
required.
generator.
Filling the generator, all of those kind of day-to-day things that we just gaan on and we just do as South Africans.
Yeah, we've got a phone going, but Craig's going to turn it off.
But as South Africans in particular, what it allows for is that home living, apartment for life living, that people can move into a centre and actually be able to do everything that they require and not have the fear and the concerns that they otherwise may have.
I agree with you there. But something else that they said on this TED Talk, which I found quite interesting, they said sometimes you get the old coots, they called them old coots, not my words, their words, and they said sitting around a table, and no matter what you do, they'll complain. Or they'll sit there telling you, just come over here a minute, Michael. I just want to tell you what you should be doing here, And
I've never experienced that ever in my community work. But my typical response is, bless them all.
That's beautiful. I want to tell you that shortly after you left, I was there. I had to go and give a talk there. Cynthia Ambrose was still with us then. Sure. And I cannot begin to tell you how many people were missing you, Mike.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, and they didn't know we were related. So it wasn't though they were telling me because they thought, I'd tell you.
Right.
But people were missing you. So, Mike, I just wish you the best of luck with this, really. And hope it just takes off. And I'm sure it will, because it is the right time for it now. And after the pandemic, I think people are also re-looking at their lives.
Yeah, I think people had to have a stark look at the mirror and look where they're going. Families, after COVID, and we're still, through the COVID journey. We're not through it yet. We're still experiencing it from a impact and financial, all of these different things. So thank you so much. So I appreciate it. It is flying. We've got a fantastic team. I didn't even talk about the rest of the team, but circleliving.coza, if anybody's interested, that would be wonderful. And I just hope that I've managed to share. It's been lovely seeing you and also just interacting, because I think it's a real issue, and it's a real issue that people. And the more we talk about it, then it just raises the bar to say we have to do something about it.
And the more it becomes okay, and it actually, it can be fun. You can reinvent your life by moving into a place like that. Before my mum went in, she was actually rather ill. She'd had to come up from Durban. And she was lost. She was honestly lost. First of all, she traveled a lot initially, but that didn't fulfill her. And she was searching for something. And it was only when she got into a secure living facility where she could help other people that she began to find herself again. It was that reaching out that she reached in and healed.
That reinvention of oneself by giving is actually so powerful.
Service to others, as long as we also look after ourselves.
100%.
And that's what I wish all our listeners today. Look after yourselves, keep warm and keep dry if you're in Johannesburg. And Michael, thank you so much. How would you like to end, Mike?
Thanks, Sue. I just appreciate the opportunity and lovely chatting with you, and thank you all the listeners.
And I'm coming to have a look at one of your places. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Makundi and Busi, for keeping us on air.